Welcome to this month's Policy Jam, and we're here to discuss BCS's tech priorities for the next government. I'm Claire Penketh, and I'm the Senior Policy and Public Affairs Manager here at BCS. AI has taken the public's imagination by storm over the past 18 months or so, and the debate is still in full flood about whether it will be humankind's saviour or downfall. There are questions to answer. How far can we truly trust AI, and technology in general for that matter? Who is responsible for its ethical development and deployment? What should be done to mitigate against risks? And what happens if it all goes wrong? BCS says AI won't grow up like the Terminator, but how do we ensure that it doesn't? So with all this in mind, BCS has come up with three priorities for the incoming government to consider. And to add, please do leave your comments in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts as we go through our presentation. First off, I'd like the panel to introduce themselves. So I start with Julia first.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Julia Adamson. I'm Managing Director for Education and Public Benefit at BCS.
Then we go to Holly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Holly Porter, and I'm Managing Director of the Institute at BCS.
Then we go to Jo Stansfield.
Hi, my name is Jo Stansfield. I'm a BCS trustee and co-chair of BCS Women, and I run a business called Inclusioneering.
And then to Somayeh.
Good morning. I am Somayeh Aghnia, a technologist, educationalist and entrepreneur, and a fellow at BCS.
And finally to James.
Hi, I'm James Woodward. I'm Director of Communications with BCS.
So we're going to start off first with a presentation for yourself, James. You're going to look at what our main priorities are. There you go, James. Can you see that?
Right. I can see that. Yeah. Great. So over the last 3 or 4 months, we've been working hard with our community groups across our membership to agree what we believe should be, from all the vast array of priorities in tech that we could be talking about and putting forward to the major parties who are vying to be the next government. Which of those, in a really, really concise way, are we really going to be seriously asking those parties to consider as tech priorities for the next government, which they hope to form? So to do that, what was our evidence base? Well, we know that this is going to be the first election where the new Prime Minister has to have a really big plan for AI and high stakes technologies. And not only that, he needs to have a plan for how the people who are running the AI and making decisions about the AI are going to be held to the highest standards of professionalism, accountability, and of course, ethics as well. And there's no bigger illustration than that the fact that as we speak, Paula Venables, the former CEO of the Post Office, is giving evidence at the public inquiry in relation to those very, very, very themes. And those are the things she's being asked about. And of course, all the way over in Seoul, the second AI summit is taking place. So we wanted a strong evidence base for the things we were saying. So the first thing we did was we worked with our Fellows Technical Advisory Group, known as FTAG, as well as our Influence Board, who some of our members are on that, but are also people who are out there in industry, who are big influencers, who are helping us make sure we're on the right lines. And the other thing we did was use the very long evidence base that we've got from all of our specialist groups and from our research, such as member surveys and data analysis, to put these positions together. So as a proposal for our manifesto, which is due to come out, we've agreed on 3 big areas that we'd like to put forward today for discussion with you. The first is that we believe now, and we strongly believe as the Chartered Institute for IT, that anyone at all with a significant role in information technology should be able or be required to prove that accountability to the public and to their employers that by being professionally registered. And that includes leaders using IT in critical national infrastructure like health and defence. And what do we mean by that? In reality, that means being chartered, just as we expect for accountants and engineers. And BCS has long been the Chartered Institute for IT. We've been slightly reticent about talking about chartered and putting it to the front of our messaging and communications, but because of all the issues going on now, particularly with AI, but also the tragedy and the crisis of the Post Office, we believe that now's the time really for professional registrations to be at the forefront of public thinking and of political thinking, particularly to reassure the public, but also to give every professional working in IT the confidence and the pride in their profession and being able to prove that on a register. Secondly, we believe that every child and adult deserves access to world-class computing education and also broader digital literacy qualifications. We know, Julia will talk about this, just the other day, the government's launched a consultation on the subject requirements of the computing GCSE, and they've recognised that there's a huge amount of work to do to bring that up to the standards of the modern world and to make sure that curriculum can react to things like AI, for example, and make sure that children aren't being let down and that we've got a world-class education system that deals with the tech issues that our children are going to need to work and basically live. You know, this is about having an amazing life, not just a career. And that's why computing and digital literacy is so important. And the other reason why it's important is that, you know, the digital divide is a modern measure of inequality. It's probably going to be the most modern, most important measure of inequality that we'll have over the coming years. So if you can't do basic tasks with IT, but if you don't have a basic understanding of things like generative AI and ChatGPT, you really are going to be left behind. And we know that people like Dave, who's on the call now, have done a huge amount of work to raise the importance of that. And then finally, there is still a huge diversity gap in IT. There are 500,000 women missing from the profession, and also people aged 50 plus and people with disabilities are also strongly underrepresented. Now, how can we really be honest and say we can have an industry that doesn't have bias, you know, doesn't have trust issues, unless, you know, the teams creating those systems are represented by everybody in society and reflect that society? So we believe, as a starter, those are three big priorities that the next government's going to have to address, and that's the basis for discussion today that our panel are going to take you through and answer your questions on. Thanks.
Thanks for that, James. So just tell me, how did BCS choose these as the main priorities for the incoming government?
Is that for me, Claire?
It is, yes, it is.
Yes, sorry, as I said, we worked closely with our Fellows Technical Advisory Group, who are a group of fellows that are elected and approved by the Community Board. And we also work with our Influence Board to approve those priorities. The slide I shared there was just a flavour of the wider document. So while you may not see things like cyber, sustainability, digital health featured specifically on those slides, there's a much longer document that addresses those. As I say, it's also based on our long-running analysis of data in the workforce and also surveys from members. So we've got a very wide, I guess, a wide mandate for those themes being the ones we want to put forward.
Turning now to Holly then, Managing Director of the BCS Institute first, I'd like to discuss, what do we mean by professionalism in IT? What's your definition?
That's a very good question, because I think the word professionalism doesn't really have that shortcut to meaning. So when we talk about professionalism, we sort of default to chartered status, because I think that's what we're pushing for, and that's what we're talking about today. And we quite often use the words competent, ethical, accountable, inclusive as the definition. And that's the standard that we want everybody to uphold. So a chartered professional is somebody who's on the professional register and is trusted to uphold the highest standards of ethical and professional behaviour. And the important thing is that it's independently validated. So it's not a badge that you can buy from a commercial organisation. It's peer validated. And it also involves a commitment to keeping up to date as technology changes, which is so important. I think what it means really is that somebody can take stewardship and can be seen as a safe pair of hands.
In particular, I'd like to focus on a couple of areas where those risks are potentially higher than the others. AI and cybersecurity. How important is professionalism in those areas?
Well, I think what's happening is that those areas are naturally bringing professionalism into sharp focus. Actually, what we need is professionalism across the whole range of technology, because you need to understand its impact and its opportunity and its risks. But you know, what we've seen of those areas are seen as really high stakes. We've had really well publicised implications with disastrous technology and potentially reputational damage for lots of companies involved. So it's natural that we've gone straight to those technologies. I think the failures can be catastrophic. If we take AI as an example, we've got so many well publicised examples. We've also had the government considering its approach, and what we've seen developing since the AI summit is an attitude really that's around pro-innovation, that's supportive of UK taking a leading role on the global stage in terms of technology, but is also considering the risks. But we haven't gone as far as regulation. And so I think everybody's watching and looking at what's happening. We've had the AI Summit in Seoul that James mentioned, where 16 tech giants have signed up to a set of accountability and transparency standards, which is a great step in the right direction. And recognition that the technology can be transformative, but also needs to be well managed. And then yesterday, we also had we heard an announcement, the endorsement of the AI Act from the EU, which is seen to be much further reaching. So I think we need to find the right balance, but a lot of the discussion is around the technology itself rather than the professionals that are implementing the technology. And I think that's the key difference and where we need to focus our attention. So you need technologies are only as good as the professionals who are implementing them. And, we've got a huge range of organizations now implementing these technologies. Actually, I think 80% of businesses still haven't looked at AI, and they're going to be looking to how to go about and develop those solutions and implement them safely. So we really need those standards in place for professionals in those areas, but not just in those areas.
So why should IT professionals strive for charter status? What's in it for them? What do they get out of it?
We often get challenged by this. We've often said our biggest competitor is apathy, people that don't seem to care, because we've actually been in a really buoyant market for technology over the years, and actually well-publicised skill shortages, and we've got lots of different routes into the profession, which is brilliant because it's a vibrant, attractive sector to work in, but it's a constantly changing sector as well. So, I think it's important to recognise that there are lots of people who have developed themselves to a really good standard and can evidence skills through certifications. But actually why it matters and is that independent endorsement. So charter status looks at the breadth of knowledge across technology so that you're understanding the impact of what you're developing and implementing. It also allows you to call out deep expertise in a specialism. And importantly, it looks at those technical and those business skills and the standards of ethical conduct, and it requires professionals to keep themselves up to date. So what they've got is something that's portable, something that's independently validated, and it's a rounded measure of skill and safe stewardship of technology that you could argue is more valuable than a collection of qualifications. So it really helps to bring those to life in a much broader way.
So how does this play into our policy priorities for the incoming government? What do we want from them?
Well, we want government to back this. We think now is the time. We've already seen that in cybersecurity, for example, DCIT has supported the establishment of the UK Cybersecurity Council, and we've seen a public endorsement of those standards that have been created for professionals. So we can do it, and it is recognised in other professions such as accountancy and law and medicine, where there's a gold standard that's a shortcut to meaning for everybody in the profession and something for people to aspire to, that's so important in career development and aspiration. So we think that it shouldn't stop at cyber. Now is the time to look at this much more broadly. So that's what we're calling for in the manifesto.
It's not only charter status though. BCS also accredits and validates other professionals through other ways too, IT professionals. Tell me a bit more about those.
Yeah, I mean, we start really when people are entering the profession. We accredit 109 universities against the charter standard, and that really recognises the breadth of knowledge that undergraduates and postgraduates get while they're studying computer science. So that's an important signal for the future direction of their careers. We accredit some of the digital skills boot camps that we've seen as a route into technology. We also are the leading endpoint assessor against the digital apprenticeship standards. So we've had over 24,000 people go through that route already. So really that independent stamp of endorsement on different routes into tech is really important for BCS. And then once you've got people progressing their careers, we've got certifications that are all designed against the Sophia framework, and that's skills for the information age, and it's also the backbone of our registrations. And so that enables us to develop curricula against those skill areas and provide that certification piece. And then we have other professional registrations. So we've got at different Sophia levels. So Sophia has different levels. So levels 3 and 4 is where registered IT technician plays. And again, that's an independent measure of competency, whereas chartered IT professional is at level 5. We also offer the Engineering Council standards. We offer the health informatics standards called FedIP. And recently we've been involved in developing professional registrations for data science as part of a consortium with the RSS, with the Institute of Mathematicians and other societies. So really that sort of thread that flows through BCS as a golden thread in terms of that independent validation certification.
So we talked about what's in it for IT professionals. What about the role of boards when it comes to oversight of the technical can't say the word, competency of their staff? What are their responsibilities?
Well, I mean, boards ultimately are responsible for assessing risk and for overseeing the return on investments that are being made. So, I mean, if you think about the proportion of conversations that relate to technology in recent years, it's going to be quite high. It could be quite a lonely place for a CIO. Pleasingly, we've seen many more CIOs come onto boards in recent years. And, you know, so they've got that accountability for really steering the rest of the board and making recommendations and asking the right questions. But we think there's a much broader play for boards where there needs to be a better level of board education around the risks and the opportunities of technology, so that everybody can be more fluent in asking those questions and in taking collective accountability.
We're getting a few questions are coming into the chat, which is brilliant. And James will be collating those in a short time, particularly around chartership, which is quite interesting. So people are interested in it. And there are some interesting comments coming through, and James will be collating those shortly. Meanwhile, turning to education, to Julia, Managing Director of Education and Public Benefit here at BCS. Let's start with some recent policy developments first. We heard on Tuesday from the Department of Education that changes are afoot with the GCSE Computer Science. According to new government proposals, the impact of artificial intelligence must be taught under proposed changes to the, and I put this in speech marks, outdated computer science GCSE. What's your reaction to that statement, Julia?
I mean, it's really important that curricula and qualifications encompass relevant content and context in order to prepare students for their, their educational journey and for their entry into work. So we're really pleased that the subject content is under review. And, I think in a subject like computing, it needs to be under continual review as things continue to emerge and change. And BCS was asked by the DfE to convene a group of special subject experts to provide proposals aimed at keeping this content relevant against this sort of now and the foreseeable future. It is quite hard, isn't it, to think about, long-term curricula and how do you ensure that you are teaching the foundations to young people so that there's that long-term relevance. So there's a published draft. It's great that there's a sort of public consultation going on. So it's a really good opportunity, I think, for BCS members to lean in with their subject expertise and to respond to the qualification. I think we can all agree we want the very best qualifications, the very best curricula available to as many young people as possible. And in the UK, at the moment, there are about 13% of all students in any year group choosing to take a GCSE in computer science. And in schools in England, that's about 90,000 young people every year that are leaving school with a GCSE. So over the last few years, we've had a massive increase in that number of people, but it's not enough, it's not large enough, it's not diverse enough. We need to continue to see significant growth in that area if we're to meet the needs of employers and to ensure that we've got a broad and diverse pipeline of people able to go on to be the designers and the creators of the future. And James said right up front, that diversity in our profession is absolutely critical, because it is the humans at the centre of all this that design and develop and create, and we can easily reflect and magnify implicit and explicit biases, and discriminate against individuals, groups, and demographics. So I think diversity, ethical, accountable, competent, all comes from that sort of big, broad pipeline in the school system in the first place.
So just moving on then, as well as those changes to the computer science GCSE, where there's also, we'd like to see an applied computing GCSE in addition to the computer science. Why is that important? Why do we need that?
Well, my first response is, well, why wouldn't we? So I think, our world is digitized. Computing permeates every sector, every role, most roles. So the business leaders of the future, teachers of the future, policymakers of the future, medics, lawyers, accountants of the future really need to understand how computing, the potential and the risks of computing, how it can be used safely and responsibly, how it can make a difference, how it can advantage, disadvantage, include, exclude. And a little while back, we did a YouGov survey, or YouGov did the survey, we commissioned them to do it, where we asked parents about what they thought, and actually the majority of parents, it was 96%, agreed that learning the sort of broad computing and IT skills in school was really important. And the majority agreed that their young people shouldn't be leaving school without some sort of qualification. So I think choice is really important, but recognizing that some people will go on and be our profession, be the creators and designers of the systems in the future. And everybody else is working with increasingly advanced digital technology and really needs an increasingly advanced understanding of that. So that's where that comes from.
But there's also this idea of having a broad digital literacy qualification that's available to everyone. What's the idea behind that? So, I mean, I'm not a digital native. I don't know about you, Julia, but I didn't leave school with any kind of computing qualifications back in the dark ages. So why is this necessary? I mean, not to say for me, maybe I should go and take one now. What do you reckon?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, it's, how do we ensure that everyone has a fair opportunity to participate fully in a digitized society? And the one way at scale to do that is through this incredibly precious education system that we have in the UK, to make that available to everyone. And at the moment, I don't think we're adequately meeting that need, and we're excluding disproportionately certain groups. So, for example, 94% of girls are opting out of their computing education at the age of 14. That will have an perpetuating inequality and impact on future life chances forever for those young people. So yeah, I think, no, it's not good enough. And it could be relatively simple to implement this layer of, I'm very much a fan of stage, not age, and potentially within this sort of qualification. Why would we choose a qualification? I'm not even sure, but it's partly because the education, the way to get these things, the levers within the education system we have, means that the solution becomes a qualification. But the reality is we want knowledge and skills for every person, so that they are able to participate fully, where increasingly the stakes are high. So being able to claim benefits, being able to apply for a job, being able to get a bank account, being able to register to vote, being able to understand that the information that you are receiving in relation to your choice around voting perhaps cannot necessarily be relied on from certain sources, and understanding how to fact check, understanding how to triangulate. These things are becoming increasingly high stakes. And if we're not brave enough to provide this for every young person, then we're just perpetuating inequality. In fact, we're deepening the digital divide.
It's interesting. I just am looking at the chat, and I'm multitasking here. And there was somebody just sort of said the idea of digital natives is a myth.
Yes.
And I think that goes back to what you were saying before. Without digital skills these days, you can't do anything, can you really? If you want to go shopping, you want to, like you say, claim benefits, you want to pay your tax, everybody needs to be online and able to do it. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. So I think that goes back to this idea of, why have a general, broad digital literary qualification?
Yeah, and I think there's a big difference between user skills and digital literacy, and the sort of critical thinking skills and being able to critically appraise and understand the implications of, and understand, why something is working in a particular way. So it's not about necessarily being able to swipe through your photo, So I think there is definitely a confidence, perhaps, difference in different groups, and perhaps age groups in particular, about being more confident about just having a go, which might lead some people to think that digital natives is a thing. But I don't think we're born with an inherent ability to critically understand the impact of algorithms, for example, on perpetuating disadvantage, and the implications of furthering disinformation by sharing. These are things you actually have to explicitly teach people and help them to understand. So for me, these are critical. There are really three audiences. There's everybody and our level of digital literacy, and how we all have to continue that. And I think that's at every stage. That's not just at school or college or university. That's into the workplace and beyond, as technology becomes increasingly advanced and permeates every part of our lives, and then those people who are going into work into a non sort of digital professional role, but are increasingly leveraging or not the potential for good of technology, and then the increasingly diverse and larger pool of people that can play a role within our profession.
Which takes us nicely to digital sort of diversity and inclusion. And for that, on this Policy Jam, I have Jo Stansfield, and I also have Somayeh Aghnia, who's a fellow at BCS. So turning first to Jo, why is diversity and inclusion important in tech? What we've heard a lot from Julia now talking about, that there needs to be more, it needs to be more accessible, there needs to be more women, but why does it actually matter?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. It's a really great and important question. So I'll just explain a little bit about myself and my background first, so you know where I'm coming from when I talk about this. So we're on a business called Inclusioneering, and we help tech and engineering organisations with diversity, equity and inclusion. But that's not what I've spent most of my career doing. Actually, my past has been developing industrial software, which, as I'm sure many of you can imagine, is very largely male-dominated part of the industry. So a lot of my interest and then kind of professional expertise has come from my lived experience, that I've then taken a business psychology master's degree to be able to really bring kind of evidence and validity to the way that we're doing the work, because this, is very sensitive things that we're dealing with here. People's identities, their opportunities, and their fundamental rights in some cases. So there are two main reasons why I see diverse, equitable, inclusive tech workforce as being really important. And the first Julia's really touched on actually is about making sure that what we're developing in terms of the tech products that are out there in the world are actually equitably meeting the needs of everybody across society. When we have lost 94% of girls in the pipeline through education, how can we be sure that we're building products that are identifying the problems faced by women, are appropriately designing the systems and the solutions to address those issues, are testing them properly, and are deploying them in such a way they actually have access to those benefits? And of course, the same is very much true around the accessibility of systems to people with disabilities, say. This really extends into giving people opportunities to have work as well. So beyond the impact of the systems themselves, are we actually providing equitable opportunities for people to have meaningful, careers and career progression? So, looking across society, actually, we talked about gender, we've already looked at women, and we've talked a little bit about disability as well in some of the stats that the BCS has gathered. The digital divide is a real key topic, actually, and a lot of the work that I've been doing with manufacturing businesses is really highlighting what I think is a looming crisis in this, as some of the more traditionally manual work is becoming increasingly digitized and automated. The skill sets that people require for their work changing. But research by the Tech Talent Charter and some of the research that we've carried out shows that there is a huge gap in the tech workforce of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Only 9% of the tech workforce, as compared to about a third of the population. So there's huge gaps that really need to be addressed.
It's interesting, isn't it? When we talk about inclusion and diversity in tech, we normally just think about women or people from ethnic minorities or people with disabilities. But what you're actually saying is we're in danger of potentially excluding a very large tranche of the workforce.
Yes.
And that's not something that comes up that often, is it? When we're thinking about, I mean, what would be the benefit of actually reaching out, changing that, and changing the dial when it comes to making those groups who are digitally excluded, because maybe industry has moved on? What would be the benefits to society and to those people?
Well, I've been thinking in the manufacturing context where I've been working, this is about whole communities. We've seen some of the historic situations where, for example, mining was discontinued, and that has impact on an entire community. And as we're seeing manufacturing changing, we will see the nature of communities changing with it. So this is really fundamentally important to people's lives, really quite holistically.
And you yourself, I mean, you started as a woman in tech at an industrial software company, engineering firm, 20 years ago. So you've obviously seen this at first hand as well, haven't you?
Indeed, yes.
Trained as a business psychologist, which is amazing. So your journey is very personal when it comes to this, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I'll say I actually came to it from the point of view of being a parent above the point of view of being a woman. So when I started my work, actually, it was kind of the first time I really felt that I belonged somewhere. I was doing stuff that I really loved to do. The work was really motivating to me. I found it really important. And I was always kind of curious that, I'm only, the only woman in my team. I actually went for 15 years of my career not having any women anywhere in my management chain. But in a way, I was happy enough to be unique and a bit different like that. It was only when I had children and then I realized a lot of barriers were actually in place to me being able to fully participate in some of the workplace kind of activities, some of the expectations of work, particularly when there wasn't sufficient flexibility or expected travel or work outside of hours. And there just wasn't support in place to actually enable somebody with responsibilities outside of work to participate in that.
So what are the main issues that you face through your consultancy when it comes to advising companies in the tech and engineering sectors about diversity and inclusion?
So there are 4 things I'd like to talk about, and I'll talk about each of them quite briefly. The first one is what is most often raised as an issue with me. Often when I'm networking, meeting people and kind of talking about the work I do, they will say their organization find it really challenging to recruit a diverse workforce. And of course this is true. We know that we don't have 50-50 representation of gender. We've got about 20% women in tech. But actually, after a bit of conversation, what usually transpires when I'm talking to people in these organizations is actually they're probably even below the industry average. And that, it really is indicating a need to look internally into the business as well and actually look at the organizational culture, the ability for them to show the purpose of the work, show why it's relevant, do things that are actually attractive to a much broader range of people and provide equitable opportunities for them in their career paths. Second issue is all around data. So we've got great data about gender. BCS has got great data around ethnicity, disability, and more, but most organizations don't actually have that data. So many organizations don't actually know where they are. And so they don't know how to determine, well, what scale of problem do we have? Where do we focus our attention? And that's kind of where I get involved to help with the data side of it. The next 2 issues are kind of related to each other, and that's around innovation. So very often, actually, organizations that are most focused on innovation, and particularly around sustainability, thinking about transformation and how do we actually bring people in who are going to help us achieve the innovation that we really need to for the future our business and the kind of sustainability of the things that we're producing. And then the final one of this is kind of related, and it's on the AI topic that I know we're going to talk a lot more about, is how do we make sure that what we're doing is equitable and that we're actually being responsible in the way that we're innovating and creating products that are going to give benefits equally to everybody.
So thank you very much for that, Jo. Turning now to Somayeh, you studied software engineering at university, have been a developer, product manager, project and a business analyst. You set up Geeks, a custom software and AI integration consultancy, helping medium and large organizations evolve and grow. When it comes to technological, and I'm kind of having difficulty with my words today, technological advancement. So when it comes to AI, what do you see are the dangers in the tech sector if it doesn't become more diverse and inclusive?
I think one element of my past that would make it very relevant to the question is the fact that I'm an immigrant as well. So I came to UK 20 years ago after I have done my bachelor's degree, and I set up a business back in Iran, where I am from. And then I came here to study my master's degree, and I set up Geeks and a couple of other businesses here. And when I talk about AI, I always talk about it as I came here as an immigrant by choice, and I knew what I'm getting into. I knew the unknown, I knew the dangers, I knew the setbacks and things like that to some extent, not fully. So I made that choice consciously. Whereas now you're all being parachuted as immigrants to the new world that is unknown to all of us. Some of us know and understand that unknown aspect of it, but a lot of us are completely oblivious and ignorant to the fact that we are actually going to the new world and we know nothing about it. So the more we have resources, the more resourceful we are. And I see diversity as an element of being resourceful. How could we ignore different perspectives, different capabilities that different types of human, from gender to age to ability or disability, or different kinds of diversity that we have? How could we dare to ignore it when we need everything we can get our hands on to be able to be successful in this new world we are going to? As an immigrant, I would not have ignored any resources I could get advice from, I could get a view on. I would want to know wherever I go, like who has been there before, what different people think, what different people see that I might not see because, you know, I might not have that perspective. So to me, it's a no-brainer. What makes it interesting is that I when I talk about diversity in businesses specifically, I always say, don't do it if you're not prepared to do it, because it is difficult. Don't do it as a tick box exercise, which a lot of businesses do. They just go and commission a recruitment agency who knows how to hire diverse people into a business and get somebody, get a woman, get a disabled person, get a LGBT person to the business, and then all of a sudden we are a diverse company. No, you're not. You just create a massive dysfunction, because if you're not prepared how to interact or how to lead or how to behave in a diverse company, you're going to do like massive damage to the business and to the diverse people you're hiring. And we can't afford that. Like, if we don't have enough women in the business and we hire them to businesses who don't know how to create a safer space, how to utilize what the perspective of a woman is, then we are very likely to lose that woman and their capability into the business that could be utilized.
Just a quick one. I can see James has come back on screen. He's obviously keen because we've had quite a lot of chat going on, and James is going to come through with a few of those points shortly. But at a recent BCS event that I was at with you, the CIO network, you talked about the need for a human-centric approach. Why is that important when it comes to technology? Why is it that, as opposed to us thinking, what are we doing? How does it all work? How does it all fit? Why do we have to care that it's more about what it can do for us as opposed to the other way around?
I would like to think that technology is a space that we have a lot of clever people in. So we have a lot of intelligent people going to the sector, which means we need to make better decisions because we have a very strong intellectual source in our community. And how could we go on and not look back in the past 30 years and look at how we have created technology and what kind of damages we have caused to the society because we didn't think and we didn't utilize the experiences of different people. So I was looking at the chat a bit, and there were comments about the chartership and senior people being fellows and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, but look at who's creating the tech. Yes, we might have the CIOs of large organizations being people who are more senior and more experienced, but who's creating the tech that is impacting millions and billions of people? The kid out of the university, the school leaver. Bill Gates was a school leaver. Zuckerberg was a student when he created Facebook. Sam Altman is in his 30s. So the big tech is being created, but young people, if we cannot bring them along, and if we cannot make them think about the effect of tech on humans, then we are just going to keep repeating the same. And what does that tell us about our sector, that we claim we are intelligent people, we're clever people who are doing tech, and then we are at the same time, the irony is we are being very stupid because we don't think about the impact.
I hope we're not being too stupid. I hope with this we could shed some light and enthusiasm on this. So just turn it to James. James, there's quite a lot of chat, isn't there?
Yeah. So great comments so far in the chat. Really, really thoughtful. It's great to see so much engagement with what the panel is saying. I think if I could summarize the many comments in the chat, I think there's so many people on there that are proud of their professional status, proud of their registrations, but also slightly frustrated that almost like we can't break through to the rest of the world to show them the value of that on at the very largest scale that we've wanted to do for a long time. And I think I'm drawn to the comment by Paul, who said, well, my son is responsible for hundreds of IT staff, but can't see an advantage. Really frustrating. How can we get leaders of very large teams to want to be the trailblazers and to be the icons that say, look, you know, my 200, everyone, all my 200 team members are chartered or professionally registered because I'm proud that they want to reach those higher standards. And if they are not held to those standards, I want them to be held to account under a code of conduct. And I'm proud that that will happen to them. And I think that's the case we have to make. So if government doesn't mandate it through some kind of license to practice, which I think is the highest level that we would aim for, then we need to go the other way. And we need to have such a large push with industry, and it needs to be such a sort of force, an irresistible force, that industry almost does it as a de facto license to practice in the way that we've seen with HR. You know, in HR, people aren't generally employed without those appropriate registrations, and accountancy obviously is regulated in a different way, but that's clearly seen a very high level of support for those registrations. But I think HR is a really good example there. And I think that brings me to the post office, which I've mentioned is going on at the moment. People were asking about what BCS's approach to that is, and we've published that previously. But I can tell you a little bit more about that. We're going to be holding a summit meeting, as we're calling it, with CEOs of about 10 other professional bodies across the sector, because we all recognise that there were systemic failings really across the post office. You know, areas like law, management, as well as IT, and we're all going to come together to look at what our approach should be. But for now, I mean, I know there's a very strong, absolutely right, there's a very strong keenness for BCS to take action where appropriate, and we've absolutely pledged that once the inquiry is finished and any appropriate legal proceedings are finished, then of course any individuals or groups of individuals who are found, you know, censured under that under the recommendations of the judge, then we'll take any appropriate action possible under our code of conduct, and we're absolutely pledged to do that.
So I was also just looking at that because I like to do that. And one of the subjects, Julia, I'm going to put you on the spot, sorry. But one of the things that came up was the shortage of teachers when it comes to computing. What's your reaction to that comment?
Yeah, a shortage. I mean, it's not just computing. I mean, computing is one of the worst affected subjects, but there's a crisis in terms of recruitment and retention wholesale. So absolutely, really mindful of that. I think So there are support systems, there are programs. So, you know, they're not BCS things, they're things that the government are doing. Maybe BCS may be involved in some of them, for example, scholarships supporting the training of new secondary teachers into role, and we've supported over 800 people to enter secondary. And then the National Centre for Computing Education, which I think a lot of people will know that we were part of making the kind of business case to Treasury for that £100 million investment in teacher CPD. And that is not only training the original sort of ICT teachers to learn the new content, but also helping teachers from other subjects transition and supporting people to enter to become teachers. Yeah, it's not an easy issue. We've got a pilot at the moment. We're working with Microsoft on a pilot where we're working with industry professionals who are systematically supporting the sort of co-piloting, I would say, the teaching of computing in secondary schools. So using those people who already have a subject expertise in a program called TEALS. It's really small scale at this stage, and we're really observing and evaluating to see whether that can have the impact that we hope it would. It already exists in about 8 other countries across the world, and we're seeing what it does in England, and we're interested to see whether that could have some traction in the other nations across the UK as well. So yeah, it's not an easy issue, and I completely recognise some of the budgetary challenges and, you know, the cost of providing this level of education, but it's undeniable digital's here, and we have to try and work through a way to ensure that every young person has the adequate support to become skilled and knowledgeable to thrive in what is our digital society.
Somayeh, you've raised your hand. What point?
Yeah, I can't help but wanting to mention the complexity of education and computer science and software engineering as a whole. The biggest issue, apart from what the issue of the teachers we have in all subjects, the specific issue of the technology piece is that people will earn so much more outside the education system. So we always say that, and with all due respect to teachers who teach computing, we all know if you're really good at that, you will earn so much. So you either have a massive love for teaching that you would go into teaching, or you're just not really good. So you're not being able to work in the business. That's why you go to the teaching. So the big problem is we are not. So I love what Julia is doing in terms of bringing, like, we need to do something to create an incentive scheme in taxes, in whatever ways we can do to bring the industry expert, because they are the one that are at the edge. So by the time you teach a teacher, you create the material and you teach a teacher to teach computing, the industry has moved on, the technology has moved on, something new has come up. So they're always behind. And what you see is that the students always feel, I know so much more than my teacher. So they have no idea. So why should I even listen to the things that I don't know and they say? So I think it's a very, very complex issue to solve, and we need to find a way to solve it, because otherwise we're always going to be behind, and it's kind of ridiculous. Our teachers, like OFS just released a report on Bradford University failing them in all their quality assessment of the computer science degree that they are teaching, saying that it's even below GCSE. And I feel for those students, because, you know, but it's hard if you're disconnected with the industry. It's very hard to keep up to date.
You're getting a lot of love from the chat, Somayeh, I must say that. I just want to move on now, because we're coming up to the last 10 minutes of this. Just in general, this is being dubbed the AI election by some people, because it's one of those things. It's AI suddenly everywhere. We're worried about it, we're concerned about it. And then there's all these amazing opportunities, and it can revolutionize healthcare. And it's like, could be the thing that saves us all. But I'm just wondering, just bringing it back to our 3 pillars. I mean, have governments, and not just ours, but globally, really got a handle on what the consequences of AI will mean at a societal and an economic level. So I'm going to throw that open to, who shall I pick first? Holly, you've been rather quiet, so there you go.
I don't think government has got a handle on it yet, but I think, you know, there's a recognition that there needs to be the right dialogue with industries. I mean, already, you know, there've been meetings through the regulators, and they're gathering different people to talk about the impact in different sectors. And I think, you know, the use case piece is very important, because that's what brings it to life. It brings you the inspiring examples around health, but it also brings a unique set of risks. And so we almost need to think about, you know, those risks to set the parameters and to sort of really understand what we might need to impact. You know, I think in terms of what BCS is talking about, you know, the dialogue very much started with, well, what are the use cases? What's the adoption going to look like? You know, as a company, how do I implement it? We have a CIO network, for example, that we bring together that's been mentioned, and Somayeh often comes to that. And you know, the conversations initially were around, well, who's adopting it, and how's that going? What policies do we need to have in place? Where do we need to have the human in the loop? You know, how far can we go? How do we use things like sandboxes? But now the dialogue has moved on. It's around, you know, what do we need to have in place as professionals? How do we manage it? How do we steer it? And, you know, really sort of feeling that they want to take that accountability. So that's why I feel that, you know, government needs to sort of close the loop around this professionalism piece, and actually the individuals that are looking at implementing it and stewarding it within their organisations. So that's a sort of answer to your question, hopefully.
Just again looking at the chat, Dave Donahue talks about plenty of suggestions for improvements, and those who aren't already engaged with the relevant BCS specialist groups that cover these areas do get involved. I think we would all champion that. I mean, we are a membership-based organisation, and I think that is very important that you know, this reflects what our members feel. So I'm going to just move now, taking it back to that original point about this being the AI election, and you know, what are the consequences? Have governments really got a handle on it? Joe, you were nodding when Holly was speaking just then, so I'm going to go to you next.
Yeah, I really agree with Holly's points, particularly around accountability and making sure that the right thing is done. And that is down to individuals as professionals, but as a business psychologist, I always think about the responsibilities and accountability that organizations need to take as well. And I think that's where regulation becomes really important, actually. And I think that the risk-based approach of the EU AI Act is a really great model of how to think about these things. You know, like Holly says, it's very context specific. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to this, but how organizations identify their risks, they mitigate their risks, they manage the risks going on, they monitor what's happening, is really key to make sure we don't have another Post Office Horizon scandal. You know, and I think that was a really interesting case study of how it doesn't even need to be really whizzy clever tech, actually, that's autonomously making decisions. This interaction of people with the system and the way that that's kind of governed and organized in the business can have disastrous consequences if that's not really well managed.
Julia, just thinking about how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're I'm going to answer it from an education perspective, because I think that's why you want me here on this conversation. But I think what we're lacking is this really strong vision around, you know, that this is essential. This is an essential sort of functional level entitlement for everyone, and we need to have higher expectations. Yes, I understand the challenges of well-paid sectors, but there are other. Tech is not the only place. We get, you know, so we have science teachers, we have maths teachers, we have you know, so I think we need to keep those expectations high. We need to ensure that there's enough curriculum time, and we need a really strong vision from government that this is an essential part of an essential role for our education system at all phases, for all people, not just feeding our profession. So, you know, I go back to what I said at the beginning, these three audiences, everyone for life in this world, in our country and beyond, and everyone in every role and all of the decisions that they make to use or not use technology, whiz pop bang or not, and the questions they may not ask or the processes they may not put in place to ensure that what they're using is right and is not harming. And then that plentiful and diverse pipeline of clever people who are able to go and do great things with technology to make our world better.
Which is always what we try and do here at BCS, isn't it? With our strapline of IT, making IT good for society, which is quite a nice, casual little ditty, I find. I was just thinking, we're running out of time now. We've got 4 minutes left. So, Somayeh, I'm not going to come to you and ask you about the global and societal impact because we've already covered that. But I'm going to come to you first. Now, this is what I do to people. I'm quite evil like this. But if I were to put you in a room with a leading minister from the next government for our sector, Somayeh, what would be your 30 seconds if you had your elevator pitch? What would it be? What would be your elevator pitch?
I would urge them to make a mandatory requirement for directors of the companies to have some sort of AI education, like fundamental AI education. I would ask them to create an AI framework with at least 3 levels. The basic levels that everybody have to, like kind of like an ISO thing, but like more forceful, if you like, that people based on that framework, they need to report back. Everybody, all levels need to report back in their strategic annual strategic report that they have to file with Companies House. There needs to be a section on have they looked at AI? What's the risk of AI to their business? What's the opportunities of AI? What are they doing about it? So that transparency, but also the fact that it will make them to think and they can't just ignore and all of that. And then the higher level of that framework, so level 3 of that framework, needs to be catered for kind of people who their businesses touches millions of people. So say public sector, that kind of stuff. I would make it mandatory for them that they have to have at least 2 fellow of BCS on the board. And I have a reason for 2 is because then we make sure that we don't mess up like we did in Horizon or other scandals. And we are going to see more and more of this with the AI adoption. So I would really, really urge the government to make it mandatory, because carrying that fellowship or chartered either has a weight on the shoulder of the people who are carrying it. Like once you have that, then you feel responsible to raise problems.
So you've gone over your 30 seconds. I'm doing it.
I will write it up to become 30 seconds. You just put me on the spot, so it's not confirmed.
Now I'm going to turn to Holly. What would your 30 seconds with a senior minister from the incoming government, if you had that privilege of being, I don't know, stuck in a lift with them or something like that, what would you say to them?
I'm going to be even shorter than that. I'm going to say we really need to implement this gold standard of competence for technology professions in the light of the emerging technologies and the challenges and the opportunities that we're facing. And this gold standard needs to create the right cultures, the right behaviours and the right outcomes. So charter status should be mandated and backed for critical roles, and it should be upheld widely as an aspiration and a career pathway. So that would be my pitch.
Jo?
I'm slightly torn because I have 2 pitches that I talk about. So one of them would be around using data to make tech better, and actually organisations across industries, particularly around pay gap reporting, because actually we can learn an awful lot from data about where challenges are and use that to direct impactful, meaningful change that actually makes work better for people. The other would be around kind of ethical standards of governance, and I think mirrors a lot of what Somayeh's talked about and said far more eloquently than I can. So I'll just say, yeah, fantastic answers.
And finally, Julia.
Well, in that sort of public sector, just extending that further, Somayeh, I'd say, you know, every education institution needs to be part of that framework. They need to explain what their digital literacy offer for all is. And then on the sort of the thorny issue around, have we got the capability in the teaching profession? I'm not just talking about schools, but all the way through. We need to have another creative look at that. What can braided careers do? What can we expect of industry in terms of give back? Because that won't go away without some proper creative thinking. That will just continue to perpetuate and probably become worse. So yeah, that's what I do say when I get opportunities to bend someone's ear.
Always good, isn't it? That 30-second pitch. They may be minding their own business and you just shuffle up to them and just hit them with it, as we did at the party conferences, if I recall, Julia. So thank you all. It's been a fantastic discussion. I hope you've enjoyed it. And the chat, there's been some good feedback in there from that. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the points that you made. There will be a write-up that our new chap, Andrew 12s, is going to be doing. And thank you all very much. And we'll be having our next Policy Jam in again a month's time. Thank you so much.